Freddie Mercury, one of the most dynamic and influential men in music history. Charismatic, talented, with pipes like no other. The level of icon Father Freddie was and still is something truly remarkable and very well earned, forever elevating the tradition of skinny white guys in rock and roll. So you can imagine my shock when I found out a number of years ago that Freddie wasn't white. Farrokh Bulsara was born in the British Proctorate of Zanzibar to Parsi Indian parents. In the early days of Queen, yeah, Freddie looks not exactly foreign, but exotic for sure. It's this image that sticks in our minds the most of Freddie looking like a skinny white guy. Now, if Father Freddie wasn't white, what does that say about whiteness? Can anybody be white? Are there only a few select people allowed into the white club? Since who is and who isn't white, and whiteness itself is something that's almost never looked at or analyzed, I thought it was about time to dive in first and figure out this whole whiteness thing. Whiteness. We all know what it is. We all know what it looks like. We all know what it's done in the past and continues to do to this very day. Even though we all seem to know what whiteness is, it's shockingly difficult to define what whiteness actually is. Who is white? And after doing a ton of research on whiteness, I think that's by design. Unlike being black or Asian or Latino, terms that are designed to include as many people as possible based on things like physical features and language and geography, whiteness was not designed that way. Whiteness is very, very exclusive. Only a few very select people can claim to be white, based on not very concrete rules other than white is the opposite of blackness, the opposite of Latino-ness, the opposite of Asianness, the opposite of people of color. With people of color, if you're cool, you're invited to the barbecue. You're invited to la carne asada. We are very, very, very inclusive. Whiteness is so exclusive that there is a hierarchy within the hierarchy, with terms like WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, white trash, redneck, and Eastern European. I think we could safely say that most white people are prejudiced against everyone, including other white people. To get this going, I'm going to have to say a few things about race. Que descanse en paz, the comment section of this video. Race is a social and political construct. What does that mean? Simple. Race, the way we know it, the way we've learned it, simply does not exist. It's not a thing. Now, am I one of those fools who claims to be colorblind? They don't see color at all? Of course not. That would be ridiculous. We all have physical, cultural, geographic differences. But in America, race has been designed to keep white people at the top and everyone else at the bottom, in particular black people. But make no mistake, every single person of color is affected by this hierarchy. Even if you think you're cool with white people and none of this will affect you directly, mark my words, it will eventually. Race in America was made up to explain and excuse things like colonization, slavery, and genocide. It's also very much responsible for the wealth gap and why poor whites are okay being poor as long as they're white. But that's a conversation for an entirely different video. In bare bones and broad strokes, race as we know it today is a concept that started all the way back in the 1600s, with the goal to prove, based on physical features like skin tone and eye shape, that certain groups of people are inferior and other groups of people are superior. Everything from work ethic, to intelligence, to health, to beauty standards, to crime, were all based on skin color, eye shape, nose shape, body shape, things like that. With white people at the top of this racial ladder, it gave them reason to justify enslaving black people. They had to. Blacks, based on their body shape, were made for hard labor. It justified the colonization of brown people. They had to. Look at these poor brown savages. We have to fix them and make them Christians. It's okay to kill thousands of indigenous people. They did not obey us, the superior race. I know I sound like the super liberal snowflake SJWs who claim everything is racist, and that's most likely because I am, but it's important to know this about race in America to better explain and try to understand whiteness. And I know it's hard to look at what white people have done throughout history and try to accept and live with what a lot of our ancestors did. I know it's hard. I feel you. Based on how white my mom's side of the family is, I know I have more European blood than native blood in me, so I get it. I understand. It's hard to accept when your ancestors were the colonizers, were the enslavers, were the genociders. It's tough. No one wants to be linked to that hatred, that nastiness, that ugliness. But it's really, really important to understand this history, to better distance ourselves from it and not continue to repeat it. Like I said earlier, whiteness is not easy to define. And you watching this, you might think you'll be able to define what whiteness is, but I have to ask, are you sure about that? Whiteness feels like what Justice Potter Stewart said about pornography. I'll know it when I see it. And again, I have to ask you, are you sure about that? In a moment, we'll play a game testing out your whiteness detection skills, so hang on for that one. But let's first see how exclusive and exclusionary whiteness is. Back in the 1700s, the few folks who were considered white were the ones from England, in particular Anglo-Saxon Christians. To this day, if you're any other religion, you are not considered white, even if you look white. Merriam-Webster defines Anglo-Saxon as a member of the Germanic peoples conquering England in the 5th century and forming the ruling class until the Norman conquest, a white gentile of an English-speaking nation. In order to be considered white back in the 1700s, you had to be English, Anglo-Saxon, and Christian only. Anyone and everyone outside of those three things was not considered white. This was done as a power play. This separated poor whites from poor blacks and poor native people to build this idea that by simply being white, you are superior. You don't have any land, you don't have any money, you don't have any power whatsoever, but you're white. What more do you need? By keeping everyone in the lower classes apart, it keeps folks at the top unchecked and free to do whatever they want. Poverty, slavery, genocide, making Coldplay a thing, that's okay as long as white people are not affected negatively by any of these things. Then with immigration came a ton of people who were never thought of as white, and it took them a little while to enter the white club. They all had one advantage though. They were from Western Europe. So the Greeks, Italians, French, Arab, and Irish were all welcome with open arms into the white party at some point throughout the next 200 years. And yes, Arabs are white, legally at least. They check that Caucasian box on government forms. So yeah. They have no privilege that comes along with being categorized as white, and a lot of people will debate their whiteness, but they are considered in America, legally, like I said, white. It's so very strange to me. This Western civilization that white supremacists and neo-Nazis are always yelling about started in the Arab world of the Middle East and North Africa, so they should be white with all the privileges. We'll come back to that. There are a lot of us who in official government paperwork check off that little Caucasian box when asked, what is your race? Caucasian has become synonymous with whiteness. Merriam-Webster defines Caucasian as of or relating to the Caucasus or its inhabitants, of constituting or characteristic of a race of humankind native to Europe, North Africa, and Southwest Asia, and classified according to physical features, used especially in referring to persons of European descent, having usually light skin pigmentation. Usually, that means not always. It's interesting that this definition of Caucasian and our general understanding of what whiteness is includes light skin color. For a long time, the Irish were not considered white, even though they have light skin color. They were infamously called white Negroes. Likewise, black people were called the smoke Irish. So the skin color thing sounds arbitrary. I wonder what else is arbitrary. Our modern definition of whiteness is mostly based on who comes from Europe. Well, Western Europe. Sorry, Eastern Europe, you're not allowed into the whiteness club yet. Yes, I am telling you there's a chance. No conversation about whiteness is complete without talking about the mythical Aryan race. Spoiler alert, it's on the Bigfoot level of mythical. white supremacists and caca believe and hold on very dearly to the myth of the Aryan race. It's all they have, really. Merriam-Webster gives us the best and most straightforward definition. Indo-European, of or relating to a hypothetical ethnic type illustrated by or descended from early speakers of Indo-European languages, used in nationalism to designate a supposed master race of non-Jewish Caucasians, usually having Nordic features, of or relating to Indo-Iranian or its speakers. Let's go ahead and define Indo-European. A member of the people speaking an unrecorded prehistoric language from which the Indo-European languages are descended. The real Aryan people are not European or what we would consider white at all. They are North Indian and Iranian. What is modern day North India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran. Two malnacidos hijos de puta, a French caca named Arthur de Gobineau and a German caca named Houston Stewart Chamberlain, are the two giant pieces of caca we have to thank for this racist Aryan white supremacist ideology that plagues us every single day. This Chamberlain puto was a mentor to Karen Cletus Adolf Davenport Hitler. Gobineau claimed that the 10 great civilizations came from Persians who were white and had Scandinavian features. These white Persians went on to conquer Northwest Europe. And once they got there, 10 and only 10 civilizations went on to build this great thing we know today as Western civilization. Why do the Persians look brown now? Miscegenation. They betrayed their race and mixed with Arabs and North Africans. Oh, and don't think all of Europe is great and worth your time. The only great part is Northwest Europe. If you're south of France or east of Germany, you're not really white or superior or anything special. Sorry, brah. To Gobineau and all other white supremacists, there is no such thing as a great Asian civilization, a great African civilization, a great Latino civilization. Those things just don't exist. Those massive groups of people have never done anything worthwhile, according to them. I feel sick just talking about this. No great civilizations came from Southern Europe or Eastern Europe either. It reminds me of this meme that makes fun of white people. It states, just because white people couldn't do it doesn't mean it was aliens. I guess this leaves out the Greeks and the Romans too, which is weird again because these Western civilization putos claim the Romans, the Greeks, and the Egyptians as part of their great Western civilization. But the father of white supremacist ideology is telling you otherwise, so it's very confusing. This puto white supremacist ideology es una pendejada. For many whites, the Germans and those descended from Germans are the only true whites. The only superior ones. That's funny. These superior Germans lost 2 world wars, so... But hey, it's important to root for the little guy from time to time, right? The last part of this disaster is the one-drop rule, aka hyperdescent. Time magazine defines the one-drop rule as any person with mixed blood who resulted from such a pairing would be assigned the race of the non-white parent. This was done to protect slave owners from the embarrassment of having to raise and provide for the black children that they had after raping some slaves. If you have just one drop of non-white blood, even if you look white, negates your whiteness altogether. According to the Harvard Gazette, the one-drop rule goes all the way back to 1662 in Virginia as a way to throw law enforcement onto mixed-race people, negating any rights they would gain from being half-white. And this rule is still with us to this very day. As recently as 1985, a Louisiana judge ruled that a woman with a great-great-great-great black grandmother could not claim to be white on her passport. Can you imagine the shock on these neo-Nazi cabrones after taking one of those DNA tests and realizing that they're not as pure as they thought they were? Hilarious. That gives me life. After trying to define whiteness and figure out who is white, I am more confused now than I was at the beginning of this journey. So if you're from Europe, you're white. Unless you're from Southern or Eastern Europe, then you're not white. Unless you're Greek or Italian, even though not all Greek and Italians would be considered white. But Western civilizationists will claim that whiteness started in the Middle East and in North Africa, but those people aren't white unless it's for government documentation, but they still wouldn't be categorized as white to everyday Americans. Then it's based on if you look white, but you can look white and still not be considered white, or you can look white, but if you have one drop of non-white blood in you, then you are no longer white. Since the rules of whiteness are super confusing and something really hard to wrap your head around, I guess we're back to the I'll know it when I see it rule. We're about to test that right now with my favorite new game and soon to be yours, White or Not, Celebrity Edition. The rules of the game are very, very simple. I'll name a celebrity and throw their picture up on the screen, and you tell me white or not white. We will start off very easy and the game will get harder as we progress. And the winner will win this brand new car! No, not really. This channel has no audience or budget, so no prizes yet. Ready? First up, Emma Stone, white. Next up, Halle Berry, not white. She is half white and half black, so thanks to that one drop rule, she would not be considered white. Next up, Ariana Grande. This one's a little tougher, what with her vague skin tone and last name. White. She is of Italian heritage, and the Italians in America are considered white. If you're gonna tell me Italians are not white, hold on right there. I'll have to ask you, what about Christopher Columbus? He was Italian and considered a great white explorer of the New World. So if Christopher Columbus is white, so is Ariana Grande. Next up, Queen Amidala herself, Natalie Portman, not white. Not just because Nate Lee Hirschlag is from Jerusalem, a Middle Eastern country, and like we said before, Middle Easterners are generally not considered white, but also because she is Jewish. The Jews were and still are not considered white, even if they look white, even if they come from Northwest Europe, even if they come from Germany, they are not white. Remember these culeros chanting, "Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us!" Remember the extermination of millions of them back in World War II by cowardly Nazis? It's fascinating to me how Jews like Ben Shapiro and Jared Kushner align themselves with white supremacist ideology, but they're not considered white. Maybe they're accepted now because they are needed, but make no mistake, as soon as white supremacists and neo-Nazis don't need them anymore, they'll cast you out like a leper. Next up, author Alexandre Dumas, a French author who wrote The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers. Not white. His mom was a black slave. Here's an easy one. Keanu Reeves, one of the biggest movie stars ever, starred in a couple of movies that forever changed cinema. He's from Canada. White, right? Wrong. Keanu is part Hawaiian and Chinese, and remember, that negates his whiteness thanks to the one drop rule. Okay, for real, an easy one. Hollywood and Broadway legend Carol Channing, not white. One of her grandparents was black, probably never would have guessed. Next, Catherine Zeta-Jones, white. She's from Wales. That was a little tricky because she's played a Colombian woman in The Cocaine Godmother and a Spanish woman in The Mask of Zorro, but she's Welsh and Irish, so she's white. She's just rocking a really good summer color. Speaking of The Mask of Zorro, how about Antonio Banderas? White. He's from Spain, one of the colonizing countries that was here to explore the New World, so white. If you're doubting it because he too is rocking a really good summer color, white skin doesn't always tell you who's white. The most powerful white supremacist in the free world is rocking an unnatural orange color to his skin, so skin tone and skin color is a lie. I need to wash my eyeballs out from that last photo. Next up, one of my personal favorites, Wentworth Miller, a super beautiful man with bluey greeny eyes, not white. He's an amazing mixture of African American, French, English, Slavic, Dutch, Jamaican, Swedish, German, Syrian, and Lebanese descent. Whoever believes miscegenation or race mixing is bad, Wentworth alone is proving y'all wrong. Mixed race babies. Oh my god, it's a must-have of the season. It's the Chanel of baby. Next up, actor Warner Oland, most famous for playing Detective Charlie Chan. White, he's Swedish. He claims some distant Mongolian ancestry to explain why he looked Asian, but there is no proof that he was actually descended from anyone from Mongolia or Asia. Genetics are wild. An actual Scandinavian person who does not look Scandinavian or Nordic at all. Next, icon Bruce Lee. Not white, of course. I just had to throw that one in there because I'm a huge Bruce Lee fan. Next, Sir Christopher Lee. His last name was Lee. Lee. Yeah, he was white. So white, in fact, that he could trace his lineage all the way back to Charlemagne. That's cool. Next up, Cameron Diaz. She looks white, but she has a Spanish last name. Yeah, she's white. Her family history is a mix of Spain, England, and Germany, so she's white. Next up, Martin Sheen. White, right? What if I told you his real name is Ramon Esteves? Yes, that's right. He is also white. His family heritage is Spanish and Irish, so yeah, he's white. He follows in the great tradition of actors having ethnic sounding names, changing their names to get more work in Hollywood. Ramon Esteves got no callbacks. Martin Sheen got all the callbacks in the world, plus a couple of Emmys and Golden Globes. Another favorite icon, Linda Carter. Wonder Woman herself. White? Nope, she's not white. She has some Mexican heritage, and even though it seems to be a very small part, that darn one drop rule negates her from being white. Next, Steve Jobs. The dude who changed our lives forever with that little black mirror. Not white. His father was an Arab Muslim from Syria. Now, if you're gonna say that earlier in this video, I claimed that Arabs and Persians were white, then Steve Jobs has to be white too. I'm gonna have to stop you there because if Steve Jobs is white, then all other Arab Muslims are white too. And based on how much white folks who watch too much Fox News are scared of Middle Easterners and Muslims and Arabs, just because they don't look white, they're not white. Okay, a couple more since we're having so much fun. Another icon, Rita Hayworth. I won't trick you this time. I'll let you know right now that her name originally was Margarita Carmen Cancino, and she looked like this. Easy, right? Yeah, she was white. Her father was from Spain and her mother was English and Irish, so white. She just happened to look more ethnic than what we're used to, but with the help of plastic surgery and changing her name, she was able to whitewash herself into Hollywood royalty. Next up, Rowan Atkinson, aka Mr. Bean, doing some of the best comedy without ever uttering a word. Yeah, he's white, 100% English. If all you know him from is Mr. Bean and you want to trip out, go watch The Blackadder. It's really funny. Okay, last one. Even though I think we could go on with this game forever. Actress Barbara Mori, not white. She's an actress from Uruguay who works in Mexico with Lebanese and Japanese ancestry. I'm telling you, genetics are wild. Now, after all of that, I have a serious question. Can Latinos claim whiteness? This might seem ridiculous or like I'm a traitor to my ethnicity, but neither of those are true. I thought since white folks can't decide concretely who is white and who isn't white, I'd throw the Latino hat into the proverbial rink. We can lay claim to all the requirements of whiteness. Almost all of us are a flavor of Christian. The majority of us are Catholics, but there are Christian, Protestant, Lutheran, etc. The vast majority of us have only Western European blood flowing through our veins. A surprising number of us pass the one drop rule. You'll be shocked at how many of us look white. Most actors and actresses in like Mexico, for example, look white. Like Araceli Arambula, William Levy, Sebastián Rulli, Barbara Mori, Thalia, José Ron, Angelique Boyer, Eugenio Siller, just to name a few. If you're one of those folks who think only Germans are white, we passed that test too. Germans love Latin America. They love it. There are huge German populations in both Mexico and Argentina. Thanks to those Germans, we have beer, Oktoberfest, accordions, and Alexander von Humboldt University in Mexico City. Notable Germans include former Mexican President Vicente Fox and art and cultural icon Frida Kahlo. There is a gosh dang Mexican town in freaking Germany. And believe me, you white supremacists supremacists need some Latino-ness in your genetic pool. Just look at the people who are representing you. Yeesh. In Argentina, there are so many cowards and villains who fled there after World War II to not be prosecuted for their Nazi crimes. So they changed their names and hid in Argentina. I guess they didn't take to heart the words of Otto von Bismarck. It is better to die on your feet than live on your knees. Oh wait, that was Mexican revolutionary Emiliano Zapata. No wonder you Nazis and neo-Nazis cling to this white supremacist ideology. You guys have never had any really good role models to emulate. You had to make up a bunch of stuff that is easily dismantled with a few basic facts. We have Afro-Latinos, Asian Latinos. Why can't we have Anglo-Latinos? I made a super quick case for Anglo-Latinos here, but I could go on for another 2 hours and make a bulletproof case for Anglo-Latinos, proving that whiteness is not as exclusive as white supremacists and neo-Nazis will lead you to believe. If I can make the case for Anglo-Latinos, I know that will bust the door wide open for other colonized people to also claim whiteness and see if they could enter the whiteness sweepstakes. I don't want to claim whiteness because I think it'll improve my ethnic group. I want to claim whiteness because I want to destroy white supremacy. I want to
burn it to the ground to the last member we told to eat my boot.
And keep in mind, mi familia, if you buy into this white supremacist ideology and are not white, you will never, ever, ever be seen as white. I know there's a lot of people of color out there who think they could whitewash themselves into some kind of white greatness, but that's never gonna happen. You will never be seen as white, so stop trying. You're looking a fool. And by making the case for Anglo-Latinos, I am further proving how much not just white supremacists, but white people in general will fight tooth and nail to stop that from happening. Again, you will never be seen as white, and the sooner you accept that, the better. We need to stop holding whiteness in such a high regard, and I know that's going to be very difficult.
Most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect.
White supremacist ideology is so ingrained in us, in our brains, that no matter what level of woke you think you are, you still buy into it in some capacity or another. Don't think you do? Think about all the schools and neighborhoods that are deemed scary and undesirable. I bet you thought of the hood with its black and brown residents. And when you think of schools and neighborhoods that are good and desirable, your mind went automatically to white neighborhoods. Think about style and fashion. When someone of color does something, it's often categorized as lower class or ghetto. But if a white person does it, all of a sudden, it's a high fashion moment. Think about the economy. How grants and bailouts are always given to rich, mostly white companies, and that's seen as normal and part of a healthy economy. But government assistance, or even the simple fact of paying brown and black people a living wage, is seen as something that will destroy civilization altogether. Welfare queens are bleeding us dry. Think about what religions are seen as scary and extremist, while other religions, just as scary and extremist, are deemed good just because white people are in charge. And I didn't even mention the criminal justice system and how that's rigged against us. The only way to get rid of white supremacy is to destroy whiteness. And here is my attempt. I want to start calling white-looking Latinos Anglo-Latinos, and I want whiteness to stop being the default good in society. It's going to be super tough, but white supremacy, your days are numbered.